I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Here, come on. I love my girl. She looking good.
Oh gosh.
Hello.
Have you been fighting? Your knuckles are bleeding. I'm not
training
joking.
for the Kingsman
You're
Secret
bleeding.
Service.
Are you aware that you're bleeding?
That is the voice of Sara Stretton.
I'm just telling you.
Unaware that we are in training doing a podcast. Live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. The sound of that can only mean we're doing Kingsman, the Secret Service. We're not very secretive about the inner workings right now. We have Demetri Panos.
Hello, movie fans.
We have Sara Stretton.
Hello, hello.
And of course, Marisa Serafini.
Hello, everybody.
That's right, we mixed it up. 2 guys, 2 girls.
Are you aware that you were bleeding?
A good balance.
Yes, I am aware that I am bleeding, Sara Stretton.
You probably need a Band-Aid.
I am a man. I do not need a Band-Aid right now. Sara Stretton, everybody.
He gives his blood, sweat, and tears for the show.
She only cares about the good of others.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to youtube.com/Popcorn Talk Network. Subscribe to us on iTunes and all the places you can get us for free $99, and that will help support me get this Band-Aid that Sara so desperately needs me to get. This is obsession. Hygiene,
danger, blood.
Infection.
We just saw a whole movie of action, and you're worried about a bleeding thing. Overall impressions of Kingsman, the Matthew Vaughn / Colin Firth / Samuel L. Jackson movie.
Overall, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Fun, adventurous, action-driven. For a espionage type of film, I really liked how they added the modern day twist to it with up-to-date technology and just global warming topic that's always looming over everybody's heads every single day. I really liked how it spoke to the current generation right now. And I think it can still speak to more people in the future when they go back to watch this film.
I really, really, really enjoyed Kingsman. I think that after the past month of watching depressing movies like Selma and Unbroken and other biopics that are just make you want to cry, a movie like this, it was action-packed and fun, and the music was great, and it was just it made fun of itself, but also had a good storyline. To me, it was really entertaining. It kind of reminded me of last year when we got to see the new spin, when we saw Guardians of the Galaxy, which was this more comedic spin on the comic book superhero movie. And for this one, this is made from a graphic novel. But to me, it was just this fun, energetic film that I enjoyed from the beginning straight through the end. There were so many scenes that I was not only felt adrenaline from the action, but was also laughing and simultaneously kind of dancing. So it was fun. I enjoyed it.
And Demetri?
I had a complete blast with this movie. In fact, so much so, I actually thought that we got a little bit of a summer movie in February. This, to me, as I was watching it, it reminded me of the kind of movie that they release in August. And,
like a Guardians.
Like a Guardians. I wouldn't, yes, I wouldn't compare it to that, but like a Guardians, the original Expendables, the first, was released in August, and you get, every now and then, you get these gems. I love the fact that Fox released it on Valentine's Day. We'll talk about that. I think they did a fantastic job as their quote-unquote counter-programming against the other juggernaut, which was that 50 Shades of Grey movie that you may have heard about. And I think they did a great job in positioning this movie because it really could have gotten lost in the wash from a 50 Shades of Grey, but it didn't. I thought this movie had a great energy to it. Matthew Vaughn did what he did with Kick-Ass, in which that was his love letter to the superhero movie, and in this it was his love letter to James Bond and to the spy movie, which for me was great. The references that they had for Bond movies, what they did, whether it was a on purpose, like joke to I'm gonna take something from Bond and I'm gonna take it to the next level. I just loved what they did. I thought it was a lot of fun.
I agree. There's so much credit owed to these men because they do draw such inspiration, and they're very open about what has inspired them, what they're taking off of, but they also have such a sense of making things their own and the vision that they bring to it, and they don't get narrowed in by like, we're drawing from a classic crime film, so it has to be this way. They take it and then they expand upon it to make it fit still their fun comedic genre. And I loved Kick-Ass, so it was great to see another movie from them. I also liked Stardust, even though that movie is not quite in the same caliber. But so I completely agree with you, Demetri.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of Layer Cake. I mean, he's a good, solid director, and he's worked with some great people to get him to this point. X-Men. He did First Class. And again, with that, you totally understood that he really respected the genre, the world, the sandbox, let's say, that he was playing in. And in this, he even admits, this movie, Matthew Vaughn claims this is his most favorite movie that he's worked on because he was given the time to do it. He wanted to do it right. And I think he did. I have one little quibble about the movie, which we'll talk about later, but one quibble. But outside, it was just a blast. And the church scene, oh my God. I mean, come on. That was just like awesome.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Also, to add to the X-Men for Matthew Vaughn, because Matthew was supposed to be in working on the Days of Futures Past movie. I mean, he even did the treatment for it. But then he realized that if he doesn't do Kingsman, that someone else was going to probably do a comedic espionage film. So, like, it really just shows how much he was passionate about this particular film to not do X-Men again.
It's also really ironic because, like, in the advertising, they like point out that he was the director of X-Men First Class.
Yeah, well,
it's like could have been director of more, but chose this over it.
But I find that to be, because I gave that a lot of thought. To me, it was very serendipitous because had he not opted out, we would have never gotten Bryan Singer back in. And personally, no offense to Matthew Vaughn, one of my selling points for the next X-Men movie, had he done the sequel, I would have been all in. But Bryan Singer, that just adds that extra level of marketing that the guy who kicked it off is coming back. So it was very serendipitous. They each got to do projects that they really wanted to do, and they both did a great job. I mean, I love the last X-Men movie, and I really love this movie. And I'm glad Matthew Vaughn went on to do this movie.
Absolutely. I want to start at the end, only because... because there's so much controversy in it, and I kind of want to get your guys' take, and it'll dictate where we go with it as a panel, right?
Are we talking the 50 Shades?
Yes, we're talking the 50 Well, because for me, this movie makes fun of so many things. Obviously, James Bond, but you could say Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. You could say Austin Powers and all these various things. Even the line of, like, this isn't that movie. 500 Days of Summer. It almost, but I'm glad they didn't have a narrator for this movie, like 500 Days of Summer.
Yeah. Right.
And so the ending to me, right? He said, we had to go over the top. If Bond films, I remember Die Another Day. They end on Halle Berry and Pierce Brosnan just frolicking in the bed. So how is he going to top that? Well, anal.
Well, and Matthew Vaughn specifically has said that scene was inspired by James Bond. Look, most every James Bond ends with Bond getting the girl, I'm keeping the British end up, sir. Or in Moonraker, the line was, and this was what Matthew Vaughn said. He goes, "Geez, I'm like 12 years old seeing Moonraker, and it's like I'm preparing for re-entry." When you have names in James Bond like Pussy Galore and Holly Goodhead, it's hard not to do that. So Vaughn wanted to take it to that next level. And personally, I loved it. I thought it was hysterical. He said he got complaints. And he's like, did you see them? He goes, well, there was a church scene, and right now I just pretty much blew off everybody's head. He goes, you're okay with that. But you're complaining.
Well, there's no subtlety. Unlike the things you're talking about, he just left no subtlety.
No, I mean, and I think the thing is, I think a lot of people are upset at the fact that it was so literal, but that I mean, but that personally for me didn't bother me only because after everything I just saw in the movie, like blowing up people's heads, the extreme level that the action and humor went into, having that type of, brash type of humor really didn't bother me because that's what we saw. I mean,
and that's what we saw in Kick-Ass.
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, I'm like, this movie's rated R. It's really nothing that crazy. It's funny. It's at the end. And for me, I was like, well, at least they didn't go the stereotypical route of him, like, getting with his teammate, the girl who's
Roxy.
training. Yeah. I was like, because you're expecting
Number one,
kind
she
of...
can't be called Roxy ever again. Because we have a Roxy. There can't be two of them.
But, they're like, oh, these are the two people who are going up in class together, and you expect him to, like, woo her at the end or something. So I was so happy that didn't happen. And I'm like, you have a young guy who just kicked a bunch of ass, and now he's going to go get some. Okay, sounds fine with me. Like, it made sense, and it was funny. I don't understand what the big deal is. Like, what did you expect?
No, I think it was just because everything was so over the top, it might as well end it with an over the top type of situation.
I'm like, it's just like, what would they like instead? Like, what is so much better? What is less controversial?
Well, they weren't going to... They had a different ending proposed, but it just didn't work out as well. It was a lot tamer, and they just wanted to go for it. Now, listen, the way I look at it, too, is to me it was no different than whatever violence and whatever we got out of Kick-Ass. When at Lionsgate releasing Kick-Ass, you had Chloe Grace Moretz saying some of the harshest language that would ever come out of the... I mean, she would make the original Bad News Bears blush.
Yeah, and she was like 12 at that time.
And there was a little bit of flack for that. And we can talk marketing strategies, but I think this movie was marketed great. And I think when it came to the end, I'm like, well, I'm not surprised. I mean, this is the guy that gave us Kick-Ass. So, and the mere fact that they are, again, it's just a typical Bond, and this is pre Daniel Craig Bond. Like, all the Roger Moores, even the Sean Connerys and Timothy Daltons and Pierce Brosnans had those kinds of innuendo. They just made it blatant. Like, there was no innuendo.
That's it. That's what I'm saying.
I feel like at this point everybody knows anyway, so what's the big deal?
Yeah. Keeping the
At
British
least we're
up.
all on the same page.
Keeping the
There
British
you
up.
go. I loved it.
I thought it was great. It was hysterical.
I think that, by the way, I don't know, because Bond typically gets the girl that he's been sort of pursuing throughout, and so you could, again, so you brought it up, Sarah, he could have gone with Roxy, and that would have been the typical thing to do, but guess what? In every other Bond movie, there's a new girl, so it's not love. Right. So who cares?
Yeah.
Get a little anal and move on.
I mean, get a little anal about the end, or just get a little anal.
Anything.
No, and Roxy could be the, she could be like the Moneypenny, which, Moneypenny in Bond is the woman that's always, again, the innuendo and the sexual tension between those two characters in a Bond movie. And who knows, if we continue with Kingsman, that dynamic
and they
could
want
be
to
in there.
continue with Kingsman. Like, they want to make this a franchise film, so they can't make the whole Roxy him relationship happen now. They put the idea in the audience's head, and they made a complete movie that can stand alone. And because that's a huge problem with sequels today. It's where it's like every first film, even sometimes every second film, doesn't really feel complete. It's always like leading up to the last one. And this movie is standalone. Like, I want to see more because I liked the characters, I liked the concept, I liked the world. But I could watch each one individually and still be happy.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff.
So,
great way that we are beginning. We started off at the end, literally.
Yeah, well, like I said, it would dictate how the panel went. All right, so let's talk story points, right? Eggsy, our protagonist, we meet him at an early age, and the mother's all well and good, and then it switches. How did you guys? This kid is a breakout star, number one. Mm-hmm. Did a fantastic job.
He was great.
And he's already listed to do more stuff, so we should see more of him, which is exciting.
Yeah. What are you most excited about?
Well, I know he's rumored to do, because I loved him in this. I thought that it was really fun kind of seeing him morph from this, like, totally believable scruffy kid who's just a troublemaker into like why he could be seen as a gentleman. I thought that read really well on him. And like when watching his interviews, he's definitely not that person. He's very put together and very sweet. So seeing that side of him that was very like, I'm going to break all the rules in the beginning, I really liked. I love the choices they made with him throughout the script. So that was exciting. I thought he did a really good job. He's also coming out with, I believe, he's rumored to be in a movie where he's playing a British Olympian for like a skier. It's called like The Eagle or something. He's also coming out in Legend, which is like a gangster twin crime fighting movie. With I think like Tom Hardy or someone. So he's definitely rumored. He's gotten a lot of attention, and I think he did a really good job. And did I need his early story, the foundation, which you mentioned, Phil, like the kid part? As I was watching it, yes, I did. I was really intrigued. Looking back, I was like, oh wow, I kind of forgot they put that in there because I was so intrigued from him when he was a teenager. I didn't end up actually needing the like initial little kid with the pin. Like I made sense story-wise, and while I was watching it, I was engaged, so I can't complain.
Yeah, I liked how they added that background story to him because having losing his father and growing up with a male dominant figure in his life that would probably keep him on the straight and narrow path growing up, it made his character more believable that he would be the troublemaker, that he would get in trouble with the law and all that. So like I really liked they added that, and to have Colin Firth's character be that somewhat of a surrogate father that he never had, I really like that pairing.
Yeah.
I was really interested that they did add that initial scene though of the father being sacrificing himself in the beginning, because that scene represents character work. It's background. Yeah. It's all just information for really Colin Firth's character and why he's motivated to help this kid. But most of the time, I feel like those scenes aren't included when they're that far back, especially if you are going to go to childhood and then teenagers and then transformation through training. Like, that's a lot of time to cover.
To me, it was no different than the 2009 J.J. Abrams Star Trek, where we open up and Kirk's dad does the self-sacrificing move, and that is the cornerstone in which Commander Pike tells, listen, your dad in 12 minutes became a hero. Like, I dare you to do better. And I really like that they had that backstory with Eggsy. And the other thing, and tell me if you guys agree with this or not, I felt that it's a fine balancing act. I never found Eggsy to be Clockwork Orange-ish, like gang. Like, yeah, he got into shenanigans and some trouble and stuff, but he still had a heart. I always felt that the character had this sense, like this moral sense. He just had this pent up anger for whatever choices his mom had, the lot in life that he may have had.
That's the thing. He didn't have ambition to follow through on a lot of this stuff because he didn't feel the need for it. But you're right. He had a sense of right and wrong. Like, he didn't steal that car to steal a car. He stole that car because they were in the wrong, so to speak.
And it was also a nice balance, because he could have been obnoxiously bad, and that would have been very hard to sympathize, and it would have been a harder turn to go. And I think they played a fine line, and I think they nailed it, because that's how you get to like this character a lot. You want to root for him.
And I think it's not just like, yes, Eggsy made some bad choices on purpose, but there are situations where he's walking in and he's just, unfortunately, wrong place, wrong time kind of deal. So it's not like he was always searching for trouble. It's just he was placed in bad situations. The thing is, from
the point of view that they show Eggsy in is always his likability factor. It's always for other. His motivations are always like, when he's stealing the car, he's with his friends. When he's standing up to his stepdad, it's with his mom. It's with he's kissing his sibling, his little baby sibling, as he's leaving. They always are focusing on the other in the scene with him they put you on his side, and they do like open him to having a big heart. It's his friends, it's his family, it's his siblings. You go to training, it's his connection with the girls. He's never completely alone. They never put him as the rebel who's rebelling against every. He does have connections always through the film. Even when he's being pushed aside, being isolated by bullies on the street, by bullies in training, he always has someone in his corner. So as the audience, you're always in his corner.
So, let me ask you this then, the pivotal moment, right? You have Roxy and you have him, and one of them's going to supposedly get be Lancelot.
Right.
Which, by the way, I don't understand if they both did the same thing, why they couldn't both be it, but that's...
Because it's Knights of the Round Table, or
It
the
is.
rectangular table.
But either way, I mean, the point is, if they do the same action, how you differentiate. But
Maybe
obviously,
there's more tests.
Sure. But the point is, how did you feel in that moment? Because it's a very pivotal moment, and as they say, like, you're just supposed to follow, you're supposed to blindly trust. And obviously, no harm would have come to the dog, but, he chose what he chose.
I think this deserves a John Wick reference, where the bad guy always shoots the puppy, and you don't shoot the puppy. And I don't care if the dog would have lived or not. I'm not okay with him shooting the dog. That would have made me not like him so much less. So the fact that he left with his puppy, I was like, I'm on your side. Good job. Stick it to the man. Like, keep your puppy. Like,
Stick it to me.
no, I really supported that decision, because to me, like, the psychology of being a trained robot, and if you can watch something and raise something from birth and then be able to kill it, is not something I want in my main character. I want them to be like, no, I have a connection to this. You're telling me right and wrong, but I'm a human being and I can make my own decisions. Like, to me, that's a better quality. I don't want to watch a movie that's a trained robot who's just going to take orders, because then this whole movie doesn't happen. It's the fact that he can think differently and not always follow exactly what is said that he gets to achieve. If he had followed every single thing with blind trust, then Michael Caine would have won.
Absolutely. I think you said it perfectly.
Right.
Yes, I that was great. And also, it's just the right and wrong, because had he chosen to shoot the dog and kill it, that would make him be like more so just a darker character. And then to add that, like, immediately afterwards, having Colin Firth's character die, it would make his actions more great, because it comes more from like justice and to avenge someone's death, not as revenge.
Yeah, and we sort of kind of get that that's the way that he is throughout, even through his younger... Again, we were talking, his motivation for stealing the car wasn't just to be a punk ass and steal the car. There was a reason behind it. So, killing a puppy...
And the reason, one of the reasons why they got caught was because there was that animal, I forget, it was probably a dog, in the street.
Right.
Something was in the street.
An armadillo.
Yeah. But regardless of what it was...
But he decided to go around it. Yeah.
Yeah, and knowing that what it cost him.
Right.
And it's the same thing in this situation,
Sure.
and that ultimately, that's the reality. If you can make the same decision twice, then it's worth it.
Yeah.
Or, you're strong in that regard.
Yeah. So...
I think that this is changing subject, so Phil, I'm sorry if
Go
I'm
ahead.
taking your role a little bit, but it just came up as we were talking about things that we have got to see before, which, like, for me was the phone call in the jail cell, or the representation of, like, the weapons room, or all these things that we have seen in spy movies. It's nothing new. Like, you're not like, oh, there's a weapons room? Who knew there was going to be a weapons room? But I thought that the depiction of each of these things that we've seen was done so detailed in this film. They talked so much in the press about the wardrobe, about the suits, about the tailoring. But even down to, I loved all the weaponry. I loved the pin that he uses to call. I thought that all of the details looked really classy, really elegant, very gentlemanly, and I was intrigued to find out what everything did. Which, I mean, is, I think, an achievement, because we had even seen most of them before. Like, the click-the-heeled shoes with the knife, like, that is a classic. The pen, like, so much of it is already classic, and I was still on the edge of my seat being like, ooh, what is this going to do?
Yeah, and to top that is also, there was a humor factor to all these weapons. Like, you kind of wanted to see them be used in the field, and, like, even when Mark Strong's character, when he had the gun he was shooting and Eggsy wanted to go, he was like, no, this is my gun. You have your... So there was always, like, humor to all these weapons, even though they caused a lot of violence and damage, but it was something to laugh at.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, again, going back to James Bond, the scene with Bond and Q is always one of the cornerstones of a James Bond movie, showing him the various weapons that he's going to get, which usually leads up to a car in one way, shape, or form. You know, what I loved about all of that is that they even had a reference to, you know, one of the funniest shows on TV at its time, and that was Get Smart. It was, at one point, these shoes came with a phone in them. And that was, you know, that was a classic Get Smart thing. I don't recall James Bond ever having a shoe phone, but Maxwell Smart did. And that was, like, great that they even threw that in there, because this is a node to those spy movies or spy television series and whatnot. So having the weapons and that a lighter is actually a grenade and whatnot, what the twist is that when Q is going with Bond's an experienced spy at this time. So, you know, handing it over to him, it's not a big deal. Handing it over to an inexperienced kid who's just picking it up going like, oh, what's this? Don't touch that. Like, this is what this will do. You know, and then the reversal of the knife in the shoe, you know, it's the classic, I believe, from Russia with Love, but it was the villain who had the poisonous, you know, the knife in the shoe. And yeah, the way that they integrated everything in made everything appear like fresh again, without any of the camp going on, because in today's Bond we don't necessarily, he's not a gadget driven Bond, and I'm talking about Daniel Craig, which is fine, but even when you look at the Pierce Brosnan, you know, the laser watch has always been a big deal. And so yeah, I like that this movie makes it fresh again without the camp, and you couldn't wait for it to be used, as you were saying. Good stuff.
Unless Phil has something to say.
No, go ahead.
And on the weapon track, I thought a very, very new addition was Gazelle with her amputee sword legs.
I like that.
Which I found, I was very confused by them for a little bit. Because one,
well, you open up with the weirdest thing, you know, you have the Kingsman saving this guy, and then he splits open in two, and you're like, huh?
Boom.
Yeah.
Well, I knew about her from marketing. And I was just, like, very curious because, yes, you open with that, and it raises so many questions. Like, if she has razor-sharp sword legs to cut through a human being in half, like, how does she not scratch the floor the whole time? Which they do answer, because one time when she's fighting, she skids across the floor and floor scuffs. Like, two, like, how, if she cut through the suit completely in half, how come sometimes when she hits Eggsy, it doesn't go through the suit? Which I understand is bulletproof, but is it sword-proof? I'm a little confused. She was very interesting to me. I was fascinated. I was waiting the whole time for them to explain to me why she had no legs and had swords, and they didn't.
But here you have a guy, this segues perfectly into one of the things that I loved about satire. If you know, Marisa said it great. We're dealing with global warming, and it's something that we've dealt with before and things like that. And so here you have kind of an otherwise good cause given to a bad guy. And how do you let him F up a good cause? Well, you make him psychotic over it.
No.
And you give him a sword-wielding leg.
But his theory is a real theory. People believe this. Like, his theory that, like, if... I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, but it's not
I don't
like
know that
Gore
well.
is telling you about this theory. He's a complete nut job. Valentine is nuts.
Yes.
But that's the thing. Valentine was a good persuasive speaker, and that's what
Well, if he
people
would
like
be
really.
Or he would convince, or lock you up in a dungeon. Like,
yeah, or not. Then you'd be in a dungeon. But like, I think that's why people placated to him.
but like, I liked that they took a motivation that, yes, they made crazy, but some people do believe that you shouldn't help other parts of the world because we are overpopulated. Like, people believe that. That's like a thing.
Well, overpopulation is a problem.
I know, but they
you know, the goal is not to.
But people have proposed like not doing as many vaccines
But also, it's like the people he was trying to persuade were the world leaders, the people who had authority,
They
who
took
might
it to an
listen,
extreme.
who might do, you know, a change in the society, and people might listen to them. Because also, he also, for the regular people, normal day society people, that like he appealed to them via technology.
Yeah, but
like the chip, you know, that's like, who doesn't want free internet? Everyone does that.
So narcissistic.
Like, so he talked to different people, like social classes in certain ways.
But I guess nobody here has ever watched the movie, James Bond movie, Moonraker? Which is, in a sense, this is almost a reworking of that plot, in which Hugo Drax wants to wipe out the population of the Earth, and he's bringing all the quote-unquote master race up into a space station. They're going to breed and then repopulate the Earth again. So it really is, in a sense, like a reworking of that movie. So it's just, I just found it to be very funny that, oh my God, he's just basically doing the same thing. He's just doing it differently, adding the whole thing with free internet, which again, it's funny. I just finished reading a book which was all about free internet and supplying free internet and things like that. And, you know, it's a current thing. Who wouldn't want it? And then look at what happens when you get it. So, you know, it's only going to make you...
Yeah, people don't know any better.
Take your pick.
Yeah, it'll be so free and it'll work so slow. It'll make you angry and beat people up.
I don't know. To me, it was just like one of my favorite parts of this movie was dealing with theories that I feel like I've heard. Like, I've heard of people not wanting to decrease the population in very harsh and crazy means. Free internet, the aggression thing about the whole waves to the brain. I've heard about stuff like that. I don't think...
When did you start piecing it together? Because, you know, there's...
Piecing...
Well, the point...
His plot,
because
his maniacal plan.
Yeah, because it took a very long time for us to get to a point where we fully got everything. We got bits and pieces, but, you know, it seemed even crazier than he was. It's like, what is going on? And so you had to trust it for a very long time before you got it. And as he says, like, this is the part where I tell you exactly what I'm going to do. But this isn't that kind of movie.
Right.
Dead.
I'm trying to remember when I figured out the aggression part. When we figured out that was what the signal did.
Well, I believe, we certainly figured out in the church.
Yeah.
But to what reason, we don't understand.
Right.
And all we have to, you know, and I think that's why they gave him such a over-the-top character, because, like, okay, he's talking about global warming. That seems nice, but there's no way he's a good guy talking like, you know, with a lisp. You want some McDonald's? I'll give you some McDonald's.
That was a character trait I had a hard time believing his character as a villain.
He kept going in and out, which is the problem. I mean, I believed him when he was doing it, but it was, you know, to the level of me trying to do it right now.
I get it for the comedic factor. I mean, you had to add some levity to his crazy maniacal plans. But, like, I don't know why that particular character trait, other than something else that might hinder him as a leader.
As an actor, he was the one who suggested the lisp. And he started to take with it and just did it. And it came from the fact that he used to have a lisp, personally. And he overcame it, and he brought it back for the character to go something along like how villains typically have some sort of deformity or something that's different about them. And so that's where he went with the lisp. That was the rationale behind it. I personally didn't like it.
I mean, like, I can imagine that was probably Samuel Jackson's intake on it. But my question is, why choose a lisp for that particular character? What did it add to him? Other than a comedic factor?
Other than the comedic factor, I think is
what it is.
90%.
Yeah,
it is what it is. But it also makes it, again, just going back to your Bond tropes and some of your most famous villains, who, like Dr. No had the glove. You know, some of these villains, you know, their sense of style, like whether it's the villain or the villain's henchman, you know, the top hat and whatnot. There's something different about them. Some of them are disfigured. Some of them have, like, there was a Bond villain who had diamonds all in his face and things like that.
So that was like his Achilles heel.
That's just like saying that's his deformity. Yeah. He's a villain who has a lisp, but it was done.
And I loved it.
But
I feel like he went in and out.
I wanted him to have an eye patch on the other eye of his...
I was like, that'd be too close to his Avengers character.
But I would want him to switch eyes.
Now you're going into Mel Brooks territory.
That's what I would want.
But no, he didn't go in and out. They went to McDonald's for sure. Pretty sure. But was I the only one that craved McDonald's after that? And it wasn't like
I felt this movie. This was the best.
I wanted McDonald's.
This was the best ad campaign ever. I don't know how much McDonald's got out of this, or how much they put into this, or how it worked out. But honestly, that was the best commercial I've ever seen. I looked. Everyone was like,
Yeah, it looks good right now.
It was fantastic. It was. I don't know if that was strictly like McDonald's was voting for it or they wrote it in the script first, but whatever it was so great.
It was
so funny, and I was like, yes, that is totally what I would want to have a business meeting over.
Yes.
And I was so inspired, I brought McDonald's for the crew today. And they didn't even show a burger. Like, when you think about it, they didn't even show a burger. Like, it comes out in the tray, you're just looking at it, and I think you saw some fries, and then you're like, yeah, I could go for that right now. I'm going to do, yeah.
But I think that's the American factor that they added to it, because he is an American villain.
Sure.
And they're in Europe and whatnot, so to have a very, and I love how they laid it out, like a very fancy top of the line meal business meeting, and you have McDonald's, like,
and
already there's the correlation, like it's the best meal in the world,
and it turns the James Bond trope on its heels, because the meetup with the villain and Bond usually ends up being at a luxury casino, someplace luxurious, and they're having, Dom Perignon 63, and here he is having McDonald's.
They also canceled your presumed initial party scene, which you often get in Bonds, where you do have the woman come out in the gorgeous gown, and there's the walking down the staircase, and it's parting through the seas, where you see this villain who gives like a speech to his ballroom of people, and they lead you up to thinking that's what you're going to. They heighten the suspension of like who's his date going to be, or if he's going to have one, and then you walk in and it's empty, and you get McDonald's, and it was a great spin.
Yeah, it's a great scene. It was great, a lot of fun, and it made me crave McDonald's. You're right. It was the best product placement without it being like so overt. It was just funny.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you saw it twice.
Yeah.
Not just the luxury meal. Is when the first time you see Eggsy having it just as a standard dinner.
True.
So it's like just easily placed.
Yeah, it was good
Good
stuff.
job, McDonald's. Because they did reference it, and they made fun of Eggsy, like, oh, I think you served me at McDonald's too. They got hey.
They're the
I don't know what they put in, but they got their bang for their buck.
Ronald's
It was
McDonald's.
Good job.
It was very funny. It was well played. Well played.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Definitely
Loving
one
it.
of my favorite scenes. What did you guys feel about the villain location at the end? The removal to some unknown bunker.
Well,
this was
typical.
my quibble.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to find.
This was my one quibble with the movie. I had no qualm with the location. I mean, again, going back to the Bond trope, there have been villains who've been housed in a volcano, and great thing, people who are living out in sea with a big sea station kind of thing. I love the location. My one quibble is this, because the movie was so technology driven, right? So you would figure that all these people are coming into land at this place, and you figured while they're checking them off, like, wouldn't there be a picture of the guy? Like, how did Eggsy pass off as Michael Caine? And, like, how did they not know? Like, well, wait a minute, this doesn't, like, what, huh? You're not him.
I was expecting the like hologram face, because they give you the pan up to him walking down the jet, and it's like the line before is like, "Are you ready?" from Merlin, and then you just expect to see Michael Caine there again, and you expect him to, like, I don't know, unzip some face suit,
like a
or
Mission
to be some
Impossible,
computer
rip off the
thing,
mask.
like something, and it wasn't. And I was just like,
Well, he got through pretty easy. It's like, and then
Security was
Sam
lax.
Jackson knew what that character looked like. Like, wow, okay.
Here's the, I mean, it didn't bother. One of the things, the thing that bothered me about it was at that point I felt the movie was slightly too long.
Really?
And
Okay,
well, by the
interesting.
time, because we went through a whole training process, we went through all these different things, and so now we've got, now we've got the climax, but there's a lot left to be done in this portion, and so that to me was one of those moments of like, okay, I got another 20 minutes or so.
But it led up to
It was amazing.
It led up to the great punchline.
Absolutely, but I just felt like we could have, to Sarah's point, maybe we should have cut some of the earlier stuff and gotten to that point faster. For me.
it's hard because I don't really know, actually. I was fine with the length. I didn't feel like it was long, and as I said, when I was watching it, I wasn't thinking, oh, this shouldn't be in the movie, it's not giving me effect. Like, I was very much carried through, so nothing dragged for me. And, like, looking back, being like, what could you cut? I think would be very hard, because I was so taken along for the ride. I liked the end. I thought the fight scenes were really fun. We did get this after JT. You liked the training, didn't you? Wasn't that JT's nodding his head? I was like, I feel like that was like his favorite part of the film. Was
JT's our dog in the studio.
No, he's our engineer, and I remember him being like, hey, I really liked the training, and I did too, and I thought that it was a great payoff. I think that they set up him being a good fighter by saying, like, just in the beginning, that he was in the military, he was a gymnastics, like, prodigy kid who's doing really well.
Parkour.
Yeah, we saw him do some parkour. Like, I felt like he was ready for this, especially when at first, the only person who I think is the competition is Gazelle, and we get her at the end. So to me, I was really happy with his whole fighting
original
journey.
cut, or his first initial cut, was about 40 minutes longer. So,
Yeah, I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, so and again, when you're trimming and all, and he said, look, sometimes you look at something like that, and the way he puts it is, your eyes are bigger than your stomach. He said, we knew that it was, we knew that it was long, and then it's just all a question of we trim, we cut, we take out, we cut. But this is the version that I had. And, working with digital and Avid, he said, he loves working with it because you can do everything so on the fly, put in, take out, put back in again if you want. So yeah, I mean, had the movie been 40 minutes, I don't know what was cut out. Maybe we'll see it on Blu-ray. Who knows?
I mean, I didn't have any trouble with the length or the pacing because it had a great balance of serious moments when he's with his family to action moments, and then to the critical every time they were training and every phase he went through. I wouldn't cut anything out of that because it showed the audience just like his way of thinking outside the box, and just who he is as a character. When he would always be against the grain, when everyone else did one thing to survive, he would do the exact opposite. And also the whole parachuting scene, like he was the one who sacrificed himself to be the last person who would hit the ground, or like technically the first person to hit the ground. Like he was the last person, and he always put everyone else before him. So I loved the training scene because it just showed his character in general, not just his technical skills, but just who he was.
But even training,
also thought that
training was a long time. All these different portions of the movie were.
I thought I loved the training. I loved the dynamic of all of the action involved. I thought that visually, I really enjoyed watching all the training scenes, like how they were filmed. Like the parachute scene was so much fun. The skydiving, how that they portrayed going back and forth between the cuts of like this column they had to stay within, and a target, and the parachutes, but also the fun of getting that speed of them going down, of capturing the floating and the turns, and like the joy that there is in that. I thought that was a really good combination of fun, teamwork, and of a risk. And then when you go to their initial training exercise of them with the water coming up, I felt like that was handled pretty well. Visually, how they were capturing each of these. So to me, it didn't feel long because I was just engaged with each one as it happened.
Yeah, and neither one to me overstayed its welcome. I mean, like again, let's put all cards on the table. This is an origin story. It's the origin of Eggsy becoming a Kingsman, and sometimes when we've talked about origin stories where they can spend too much time on the origin, and then you don't get enough of the hero. You don't get enough of he comes too late in the end, and then it's for the sequel. Well, in this one, I think everything was parsed out. I think it was paced very well, and I didn't find that the training sequences overstayed their welcome. There were enough in them and plus through exposition, we knew, okay, on this one, this is what you have to do. If you don't do it, you're out. And it was pretty much, when it was done, go home. So we saw the whittling down process, and it was done, to me, I felt it was very efficient, so that we were able to get back into the story. And you don't want it to be all about the training. So it would be like having, JT, you'll like this, it would be like having a Rocky movie where it's all about the training. Well, you can't have that. It's not all about the training. It is about the character. The training's a great part, especially when you couple it up with the music. But in this movie, I felt that they parsed it out just perfectly, so that when we get to Eggsy and then again, you add the layer of him not shooting the dog. Like, this movie takes certain turns. Like, and you think, well, it's going to be between these two. Who's going to do it? He doesn't shoot the dog, so he's out of the Kingsman. Then the question is, all right, well, but he's got to do something. What are we going to, how are we going to do that? And then the big other twist is, when Harry, when Harry buys it, when Harry gets killed. Like, you don't see that coming either. So,
Just like
good twists.
And
And it kept you going.
Absolutely. I just felt, I didn't think in the moment each of them was too long. It's just together, they add up just, but anyway, I'm not going to complain about it. Overall, a really good movie. Colin Firth being billed as the lead character when he dies. And he dies, he stays in the movie a long time, but there's still a lot of movie left without him.
Yeah, it's not like Steven Seagal, an executive decision. I mean, yeah, it was. That's why I think it came as a shock. Well, I was like, oh, he's got the bulletproof vest on, but no, that was a shot to the head.
But I mean, it's unfortunate Colin Firth dying in any movie. I mean, I love him. So, but to have him literally after that humongous fight scene in the church, that was like such a way to go. I think, and also it just added to Eggsy's character that someone has to leave the story for him to rise up and go against the odds. So I think it was a big character growth type of storyline to add to it.
I mean, I think that is the point of it. When Marissa said it is, there's a certain seat at the table, and when he goes, your mind just goes, oh, now Eggsy can step up. But speaking to the death itself, I thought how he gets shot, how they make fun of the whole villain speech, how they do give him the Lecco after killing everyone in the church, and after he's already had 2 wonderful fight scenes. I was like, okay, well, at least that, if you're a spy, that has to kind of be a way to go. And he had lost control, and if you had left him alive, I feel like he would have probably been very scarred from killing all these crazy churchgoer people. You would have to deal with the remorse. I don't know, to me,
but it was a nice parallel because he followed quote-unquote direction.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was the whole point of why Eggsy wasn't a Kingsman, was because he didn't necessarily want to follow direction.
Right.
But also, just adding to Colin Firth, what else would his character have added? Because after
experience.
But after Eggsy, failed the last test, and then we had Colin Firth talk to him. It's like, this is why I brought you into the program. This is why I took you under my wing and whatnot. What else advice did his character have to give?
Well, he could have gone on to lead the Kingsman after Michael Caine gets off.
Yeah,
but,
maybe,
who knows?
but it's just I felt his character, just his story, it felt like it was over because he had the beginning, middle, and end.
Well, but if we're going to make the parallel to James Bond again, too, it goes against that trope in the fact that in many a James Bond movie, the villain may capture James Bond, will reveal his entire plot to James Bond, put Bond in a slow-moving trap, let's say Goldfinger, where he has Bond spread-eagled with a laser going up, and he's like, do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. And you've got 20 minutes of this laser coming up, where this is like a Shane Black moment. This is like, hey, I just told you my entire plot. He goes, oh, now you're going to capture me. No, this ain't that kind of a movie. And it just goes against trope. Mm-hmm. It's shocking because, as you said, Colin Firth, he gets major billing, and he was major part of the campaign. For that to happen, it was like, ooh, okay, well, how are we going to bring him back for the sequel? It's going to be inventive, but ultimately...
His twin brother.
Ultimately...
That's as inventive as they get.
His clone. It was a shock, but in the end, leaving it with the 3 people, you had Mark Strong, Roxy, and our hero Eggsy. Now everything's going to rebuild again.
Yeah, but I even think, yes, unfortunate Colin Firth died, but also Mark Strong's character, Merlin, he's a big lead character too, and I think him as an actor is strong enough to be a lead for the next film if they do
Sure.
it.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
Yeah, I like Mark Strong a lot.
I do too.
And so he was good stuff. He's been in a lot of movies lately.
Any other story points before you guys that you guys want to certainly touch upon before we get into kind of the more production side of things?
I mean, I just want to talk a little bit more about Gazelle because we kind of talked about her, but she reminded me of Lady Deathstrike from X-Men.
Okay.
The X-Men United, particularly because that character had like adamantium claws. It's just like so deformed in a way, but she used that as her weapon, and that was her strong characteristic and fighting choice. I really liked the fact that her legs were like completely just bladed, so out of character, out of this world, but I liked it and it really added to her. And the fact that it was a strong female villain compared to you had Roxy, who was also a fairly strong female character protagonist as well. So I kind of wanted to see, I don't know, a girl on girl kind of fighting action. Like it'd be a woman as but like they have the woman cat fight kind of deal, and we didn't necessarily have that.
We didn't have, not necessarily. It didn't happen.
Yeah. I think
She was in space.
I
She
think the
was,
reason
but-
why that is though is because they do build Roxy up as very qualified and smart and poised. I don't think she's like the other side of like the same coin for Gazelle, because Gazelle's also very poised. So to me, they're both very elegant, strong women, and so to see them fight isn't as dynamic as Eggsy, who's been built up as this kind of, rougher guy who then comes and becomes a gentleman who can fight her. And they're both put up by the audience perspective as she is the most lethal on the bad side, and he should be the most lethal on the good side.
Yeah.
So you need to have your stars face off against each other. And of course they give Roxy like her own goal of conquering her fears and being just as helpful and going into space.
Yeah. And also, I believe that Gazelle was actually supposed to be a male originally, and they changed it to a female.
Yeah.
So
Much better.
I like that.
Yeah.
JTE, I believe you have something to say.
Wrong mic.
Yeah. Oh, wrong mic. No. What am I number?
9/11,
Wrong one. Wrong one.
10/11,
Wrong one.
10/11,
There you go.
10/11. There
Oh,
you
we
go.
switched it over. Is that right?
There you go.
There you go.
There
We
we
can
go.
hear you.
So I just had a quick question for you guys. And this goes back to Kick-Ass a little bit. Like, you mentioned the scene where Colin Firth gets killed.
Right.
He says, this ain't one of those movies. I'm not going to tell you the plan. Shoots him.
Right.
Lets you know. It'll kind of let the audience know, don't expect what you usually would expect. But then the last 15 minutes, it's exactly what you expect from a Bond-type movie. At no point did I
There's
fear...
no anal in a Bond movie.
No, I'm talking about, like, for characters, like, because he shot that guy cold blank.
Right.
And at no point at the end of that movie did I feel like the main character was any danger of being defeated by the girl with the blades, get defeated by the goons running around. I just felt like the last 15 minutes kind of left that whole, you're not, this ain't a Bond movie, you don't know what's going to happen. This is exactly what you're going to get as a Bond movie. He's going to save the girl, he's going to save Day, he's going to save the little lion, which is a little bit different, but I felt it contradicted itself a little bit from the beginning to the
Because
end.
you felt so safe. I could see that. I think that I also did like feel safe in the final battle between Gazelle and him, where it's like on a dance floor. I think I was distracted. I think I wasn't even thinking so much about who was going to win, because I was so intrigued by how they choreographed this fight. Because like to me, it really was a dance. It was on this disco floor. They had like disco moves. Like the killing strike is what is this word? It's when you click your heels together and so the knife can come out, but it has a specific name and it is a dance move. And so that was how he killed her. To me, was so interesting. But I was caught up in the like, oh, this is pretty. This is very fun. This is funny. It was like the murderous version of the dance from Silver Linings Playbook in my head.
Yeah, and
So-
I would only go so far. Again, if you are making a love letter to spy movies, there are only so many things that you're going to play around with. Ultimately, you got to come up like Kick-Ass, like, your superheroes live at the end, and they defeat the bad guys, and so you have to. There are certain things that they're not going to break or turn on their heels. But I go by the end, like the fight scene, between Gazelle and Eggsy, I thought it was great. And you're right, call it a distraction from thinking about other things. But in the end, I'm still not thinking about other things. It was a great hyper real fight scene.
So if you get to pick a fight scene between Gazelle dance floor scene, church.
Oh, the
scene
church.
and the bar scene.
Not even
and,
the church scene.
And the bar
Take me to
scene with
church.
Colin
The
Farrell.
church scene. I mean, I haven't seen anything like that in a movie. I've seen great choreographed fight scenes from movies like The Matrix and things like that. That church scene, I was going, Jesus!
I think we like
one take.
I think it's also just the symbolism. I mean, you're in a church, a place of all religious things. That's the place there shouldn't be any violence whatsoever. So the irony in all of that really added to just whatever was going on.
Harry Hart killed 79 people.
Was it
And so
79? I
79
lost
people.
count at
Now,
like the
you
first
had
5.
mentioned, it's funny because in that scene too, I was thinking of John Wick, and you had mentioned John Wick earlier. And I remember when we did our podcast on John Wick, it could have been you, I forget, somebody said the killings got a little bit monotonous because it was 2 shots, 2 shots in the chest and then a headshot. 2 shots This scene in the church, there was not one bit of and he just shot for the head. He went straight, forget about every other part of the body. It's either like right for the head, right for the face. And that scene seemed to have gone on for like 10 minutes. It was, I was like, yeah, it earned its R rating. I was like, holy crap.
And it was great to see Samuel Jackson's character be like, Selma, blood. I can't. I just shot you in the face. I just shot him in the face. I shot him in the face.
I really
is he
liked
dead?
that part where he was like, and we're one of, I think it might have been even Gazelle was like, but how do you feel now? He's like, no, I didn't like it. I don't know how you people can do it. Like, that's what I really liked. There was no like, oh wow, I feel good. I'm gonna start killing people now. He's like, nope, didn't like it. Don't want to do that.
But yet his character was still driven to cause so much violence between each other for death.
Yeah.
Which I found was ironic, but funny.
That scene.
But funny.
I mean, again, it wins by virtue of not really having been seen before. And like, there's a scene in Kick-Ass where Hit Girl takes out a ton of people, but it didn't go on for that long. Like, that scene went on, like, it kept on ramping up and up and up. By the time it was done, I was exhausted.
But the thing is, like, sorry.
So visceral.
The thing with Kick-Ass is that, yes, Hit Girl killed so many people, but they were not to be sexist or anything. They were all guys. They were all males she was fighting against. And this particular church scene, it was everybody. There you had females, you had males, you had older people,
Priests.
you had younger people, you had holy people, and religion. It was all different types of people. Just so much violence, and I think that's where it really just amped it up against any other fight scene.
Yeah.
Also, like, against your typical, not only is this in a different setting or with like a different, these are supposedly your average Joes that he's fighting, our average church folk, crazy Joes. But on top of that, like, everything's very open. It's very, like, the lighting's light. Like, you're so used to fight scenes happening at night, or, like, the lights go out, or you go into night vision, or something's happening. And this is just, like, people, like, breaking off chairs in the middle of the day.
And it was particularly wide shots, too.
Yeah, just, like, everyone's stabbing everyone. It was
And
crazy.
there wasn't they took great care in not doing quick cuts. You saw pretty much everything. Like, they did not quick cut away. It wasn't like a shaky cam. You saw everything in all its bloody gore, and it always, in all its bloody glory. Yeah, they didn't shy away. That's another thing that I really like that scene about, and the way in which it was filmed. And again, that was the one scene too that with Colin Firth. There was a scene that Matthew Vaughn had said when he was talking to Colin Firth, who wanted to be in the movie, and he's like, "Look, you just have to guarantee me. If you can't do this scene, we don't have a movie. You got to guarantee me that you can do the church scene, because if you can't, I need a strong person to handle it. I need you to train, because if you can't, then it's going to come off silly. People aren't going to buy it. People have to buy the church scene." And Colin Firth says, "I'm going to do it." And he did. And, I bought him. And it was great how they sort of meter it to the audience, because there's the bar fight scene. Great fight scene, right? But everything built up to what happened in the church. It's just when that was like a tidal wave. It was great.
Our music was fantastic
Yeah.
through the whole movie. If fight scenes in particular, I think that they really just like add that extra touch. Wonderful soundtrack.
Yeah, it was a good soundtrack.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, how about you? Like, was there a fight scene or another? Or
I mean, I like the bar scene for its simplicity.
Right.
You know what I mean? To me, it was great because you have all these thugs and how he just kind of handles them and just so much comedy, too, of, let me finish my Guinness. All right, you're not going to let me finish my Guinness. So let's deal with this.
Yeah.
So I like that part of it. But absolutely, I mean, I can't say the church scene 100% amazing.
And again, it's something that we would see in a summer movie. Like that church scene is a set piece. And it's not necessarily something we necessarily would see in February. That is a full-on, we put money into this movie. This is a set piece that we could.
But it was a third of Skyfall's budget.
Yeah.
So we put money into it, but
Which is like at about 81 million production budget for Kingsman.
which if you look at all of it, right, we're talking about falling out of airplanes. We're talking about the church fight scene. We're talking about the end fight scene. We're talking about legs. Sword legs. We're talking about the bar fight scene.
Going into space.
Weaponry.
So,
Right.
it by no means does it seem like a cheaper movie.
No. But 115 with P&A or hard drives and advertising, which makes sense. That is they did spend a lot of money, but rightfully so, to get people to go see this movie. When you make a 36.2 million, your domestic gross opening weekend, you're about 50 million right now, 110 or so worldwide box office. They've made their money back. But what they did for marketing on this movie, knowing that they were going up against 50 Shades of Grey, which, if anybody didn't think 50 Shades of Grey was not going to make money, then I don't necessarily know what planet you're on. And if you do analytics, you should give up, because Fox knew going in, okay, we're going to counter program, but what they did with that was great. And I don't know how it was when you saw it. I saw it last Saturday, and my audience was a great mix, almost pretty much down the middle. There were men, women. There were a lot more women than I expected to be there, and I saw it at a packed house, and it was a Saturday, like a 1:30 show.
Here's the thing, that doesn't surprise me. Had you said it was mostly women, that would have surprised me, because it's one of those things. Women went out to see 50 Shades of Grey.
Yes.
Groups of women went out to see 50 Shades of Grey. Yes, you could have groups of guys, but you can also see, a lot of. You guys were interested in seeing this. You saw Kingsman before 50 Shades of Grey.
I saw this
Kingsman
movie
before 50 Shades
individually. When I went, my audience was both male and female, it was packed. I went on a Saturday too. It was a packed screening. So I think this movie can cater to a lot of different people because it's just comedic overall. And
Fox
there's
did
lot
a good
of
job
fun stuff in
getting
it.
the word out that this movie is coming out on Valentine's Day. They didn't make any reference to 50 Shades. They just knew they had good reviews going in, but they started marketing this movie well ahead of time. There was plenty of television on this movie. They made sure people knew that this movie was coming out. A smaller studio would not have survived. It would have gotten lost in the wake, and it wouldn't have done as well. But Kingsman held its own fairly well against a juggernaut.
I'm happy about that too, because I think that you make a really good point. This movie is very good, but could have easily been lost. Easily been lost. Like we talked about, we referenced it a lot. But John Wick was lost. Like, it happens. There are good movies that are out there that do have big stars, big budgets, but like this movie, luckily people embraced it. They got the reviews out there earlier. They got good word of mouth going, and people continue to see it. So
yeah,
and that's the thing. I do feel there's a sense of it, for anyone who hasn't seen it, why haven't you seen it? That type of mentality. And so I know going into this weekend, there's a couple of movies out, right? And I'm excited to see those as well. But I know a lot of people that out of almost shame and guilt, they're like, I gotta see Kingsman this weekend.
Yeah, and it's,
where I'm not seeing that for 50 Shades of Grey. That was a Valentine's Day, President's weekend type of event, and obviously it'll continue, but not not in the spirit of which this is.
And it's also, I mean, this movie was released in February, and it's at the tail end of Oscar season. We just saw all the Academy Award movies come out, which are more serious, less action, more character, story driven. So, we had your occasional big blockbusters like Lord of the Rings, Hunger Games, like all the big movies that are dispersed throughout the winter season. So it's nice to have an action film after all the serious Academy Award movies.
Yeah, and movies like Taken have actually, well, pardon the pun, but have taken off at this time of the year, where I think this is definitely a cut above Taken. There's a little more production value put into it, a little more story going on.
Better.
But again, a major studio usually does not pit its film up against a juggernaut unless they feel that they can compete in one way, shape, or form. Now, obviously, the word counter-programming comes in, but there are tons of times when people will counter-program. Well, they'll put in, say Kingsman was on its own for the weekend. Then another studio may have put in, like, a family picture or something like that. This was, Fox knew what they had, and they're like, listen, we got to spend a little, maybe spend a little extra to get out there. We have to just continually remind people we've got this movie, that it's going to be fun. We know the women, for the most part, are going to be going to 50 Shades of Grey, which they did, which is great. I call it that's the Sex and the City, they just tore the page right out of Sex and the City. And yet again, here we go. Like, it didn't make as much as 50 Shades of Grey. I don't think they were expecting it, but it did much higher than even they had anticipated. And now they will start off. They can do a sequel. It'll be big on Blu-ray. And I think legs-wise, second, third week, fourth week of 50 Shades of Grey, you're still not going to get that many men to go see it. Where now the dates and the legs on Kingsman will last longer, because the people who didn't see it first, second week, those dates, now that all the women have seen it, now they'll go with their boyfriend to go, or their husband or whoever, or their partner. They may go see Kingsman 3-4 weeks down the line.
Right, and it's also like espionage films last longer too. I mean, look at James Bond. It's still relevant to this day, and it's been out for decades. So I think it's just action, espionage, spy stories. Like, those are long-lasting, everlasting kind of stories.
Sure. Yeah, and, everybody has some semblance of an idea of a spy film. Whether or not they'll get the Get Smart reference doesn't matter. The main point is, it doesn't matter, because you're still going to have fun watching this movie. And if you do get inspired to go watch a James Bond movie, you will understand why this is such a love letter to those movies that Matthew Vaughn grew up watching.
Going off of your point, Demetri, I think a key to that is something this film did right, where they did have a lot of references, but it wasn't detrimental to the story they were telling presently. It enhanced it. It was part of the action, so you weren't being like, I'm just going to harp on it because we've mentioned it before, like the shoe knife. People know that's a reference, but you're not like, he doesn't use it, or it's not important, or it was just thrown in there to be a reference.
Right.
Because so many movies do that, where they're like, oh, they add in one line that if you don't get the reference, you're like, why was that in there? Like, did that mean something? You know it's an Easter egg because it doesn't fit. And you're just like, come on.
Right.
Like, get it to work for the story you're telling. Mm-hmm. Make it be, if you discover it, if you get the reference, that it's an extra bonus. Not if you don't, that you feel left out, or that you're looking for some reason.
It feels, yeah, you're right. They utilized it much like how Skyfall brings out the Aston Martin. That's, James Bond's classic car. But they at least used it. And it wasn't just like we see it in passing, or wasn't anything like that. You're right. They used the lighter as a grenade. They used, the guns. They used the knife in the shoe. Mm-hmm. So the only time where it wasn't done, because it was made as an offhand comment saying, yeah, there was a time when these shoes came with a phone. Boom, that's it. That's all you need to say, because it doesn't come with the phone anymore. So we're not going to see that kind of silliness. Yeah. So everything had its usable function, even though it ended up being a reference.
Yeah. So that good job, guys, for actually using references correctly.
And even, but in going back to the villain, his last name was Valentine. Okay, so was it coincidence that it was released on Valentine's Day? Maybe not. But again, when you look at the Bond villains, Blofeld, Dr. No, Goldfinger himself, like they each have something unique in his name, and this guy is, his name Valentine. Yeah, I mean, and that's why I think it just built to the Sam Jackson character.
How do you think because it was rumored that Leonardo DiCaprio was going to be?
Wow, it's funny. It's funny that you say that because I just happened across a thing. He goes where Matthew Vaughn was asked about, hey, how close are you in getting Leonardo to playing the bad guy? He goes, about as close as I am to being Pope. So apparently that really wasn't. Apparently that was just a rumor.
I don't think he would have been good for it. Not that he's a great...
I understand the character inspiration, though. I think that if you take the character and you wipe out the lisp that we got, and you just envision him as a salesman who's a media exec, billionaire who has kind of a crazy streak, I think you can get a lot of Leonardo's more recent roles. I mean, if you look at Wolf of Wall Street, if you look at his role in Django, like that is who he's been playing. He has been doing this crazy salesman. That is the path he's on. So I think in that you can kind of see the genre, you can see the character.
Well, I'm just gonna quote again. I'm just gonna quote Matthew Vaughn. How close was Leonardo DiCaprio to playing the bad guy? As close as I am to becoming the Pope. I don't know where that came from. He was never offered it, never was given the script. I don't even read the internet anymore. I don't know where these things begin. I have to laugh now because I'm convinced other studios are going, how do we fuck up this movie? And who knows? I mean, I had never heard that until I had read that article, and it was just funny. And, his response, I think, is aptly funny because we are living in such a social media age that right now for me it's hard not to see something Star Wars related, and I don't want to know about it. I don't want to read about it. So it's they were saying plot lines are leaked, and for this movie I'm glad I went in as I went in.
There's also such a different pressure on casting now in general because the audience can put their opinions out there so quickly, and the funny thing is, like, some industries in entertainment really react to it and listen to the fans, which has given them if you look at TV, if you look at shows, particularly on HBO, just because I know it, like True Blood, they've had actors who characters from the source material were going to die, and there's an outcry from the audience, and it gets shifted, and characters stay alive. It's turning into this whole movie thing, whereas casting comes out 2 years before it's even been actually decided, before contracts have been signed, and then you get a media frenzy over, we hate this person, we love this person, and it's causing this pressure on these studios. Like, we're going to talk about 50 Shades of Grey later, and like, the audience through social media feels like they get a choice in who to cast.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because, I mean, I agree, but my caveat to this is, and I talked about this when I just did this Star Trek spotlight on, and we talked about fandom, and there's the good, the bad, and the ugly, and one of the things that falls under the ugly are those people on the social media. Thankfully, studios like Sony have not caved into that pressure, because had they done so, we would have never gotten Daniel Craig as James Bond. Now, because there was such a public outcry for when he was picked that they almost, like, not that Sony didn't, Sony's like, just shut up. Like, and even going into a movie, even at Lionsgate, when you're releasing like a Kick-Ass and kind of things, the social media, you pick and choose what you pay attention to. And you got to realize, too, that, yes, as much as there could be a social media Twitterverse outcry, and on the whole, for a movie anyways, I'm not going to speak for TV. For the most part, if a studio can ignore and just pick out what they think is, might have some validity to it, okay. In this movie, what's fascinating about this is Colin Firth. Having Colin Firth and picking the gentleman who played Eggsy. I mean, we're not talking A-listers here. Colin Firth hasn't proven to be in a movie on his own to carry a box office movie on his own. Okay, he's not like, and again, I don't mean
No, it's true.
disrespecting the guy, but I'm just saying he's not the
King's
gentleman.
Speech.
Yeah, but he would. That's not.
That's not box
Again,
office numbers. It's critical
No,
acclaim.
it was
But he's a
critical
great
acclaim.
actor.
No, I'm not taking away from that. He's
Mm-hmm.
a great actor, but people would see him more in a King's Speech movie, not a violent action ode to James Bond movie. He was not the first person that you might think of. He did a great job. I think hiring a virtual unknown to play Eggsy is another great thing. You don't get distracted.
And Emma Stone, Emma Watson was. Unless this gets disproven, but they had some.
Was up for Roxy. Was the end of your sentence.
Yeah. So and it's one of those things like now, it's almost. Back then, you had one person to kind of carry the movie.
Sure.
Now you almost have to have multiple celebrities to have an ensemble. But I like it when it can go the other way and can stand on its own and do that.
Yeah, and again, that's a third of your budget. If you're hiring big A-lister kind of people who are going to focus your attention on, like that could potentially bring in. But listen, Colin Firth isn't making what. I don't know, Vin Diesel would have made if he were in this. I'm not saying he was chosen. I'm just, like, the people that they chose, I think, were perfect. And I think that the way that they marketed this movie, it really got people aware. And it didn't matter. It really didn't matter. You put a good story out there, so long as the actors can pull it off and make it believable in the church scene, doesn't matter. It's a great movie.
I thought it was a great movie, too. Marketing-wise, I thought the marketing was really fun. For me, the marketing didn't... I was very surprised when I found out it was an R-rated movie based off their marketing. Because to me, it seems like a very teen-centered movie, especially because when I watched it, I was under the interpretation that Eggsy wasn't going to have to go through training, wasn't going to have to go through a transition. From my mind, the marketing showed him already as a spy in training, already there. So I became more interested when I was like, oh, this is rated R. Oh, look who's making it. But off first trailer watching, I thought that it was much more like a teen action flick.
Really,
Yeah, I
because
completely agree.
See, because I saw a lot of Red Band trailers for this, and Red Band only signifies rated R. And yeah, I mean, from the violence that was in it, from some language that I saw in it, they didn't give away. And again, there were a lot of Red Bands for this. There were a good handful of Red Bands online that you could find for it. So that I didn't. I knew going in I was going to see an R-rated movie. I just didn't realize how rated R of a movie that they hid like great.
And overall, I mean, I don't know. Maybe this is the craziest statement I'm ever gonna make. It didn't feel that R-rated to me.
Even up to the church scene.
Oh yes, but very.
This is called when you now have a blinder to gore because you've seen so much.
Yeah, but I've
this is
seen
what
a
desensitized.
shitload of horror
No, but
movies
here's
and
the
stuff.
thing, right?
and this
We've
still
been
works.
desensitized.
With the
This
exception,
is R.
Okay, with the exception of we keep going to the church scene and this, and
Right.
there's
To the-
instances of it.
The heads all being blown off.
That was at the end.
to him being
Yeah.
cut in half.
I
at
loved
the
how
very
they did that.
beginning.
With
Yeah, but
such
here's
a
the thing: you
comedic
don't
way.
see any gore with that.
Yes,
he
he's
just splinters off into like two halves, and it's very
Fireworks.
comedic.
I've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark has a head exploding. So
Great.
I get what you're saying up until the church scene, and you're right. Up until that scene, I mean, it's like I think there was some language though as well.
Yeah,
But that again that.
but
church
it's British, so
scene
you don't know. You don't know an R from like, what are you talking about? And that's I think they made light
They
of
just get away with
accents.
a lot more.
Yeah.
But I think if you're going into it knowing that Matthew Vaughn directed it and knowing that he also directed a Kick-Ass and whatnot, and that was a very R-rated movie as well. So I think it's about what you expect. Marketing, I would totally agree with you, Sarah. I didn't feel like it was over top rated R. Just the way they advertised
Well,
it.
I didn't think it was
Watching
over the top
definitely.
rated R either. I knew it was rated R. And again, I'll go back to Kick-Ass because being there, I'll just say it. The Lionsgate marketing messed up Kick-Ass because everybody thought it was a teen superhero movie. That's it. We had so much kickback and people leaving theaters because they brought their kids to Kick-Ass. Now, I didn't see anybody bringing their kids to Kingsman at all.
Nope.
I saw older couples. Nobody was bringing their kids at all. In fact, I saw older couples And I think at the end, good for them, because they didn't walk out. But at the end, they're, what the hell did we just see? Like, I think we should have signed 50
Then it's just the
Shades of
shaking
Grey.
head. It's just the shaking head.
Just, what
There's
was
nothing
that?
to see in theaters anymore.
So, and I can actually see how a scene like the church scene, if you didn't know it was coming, and that happens, some people, they are adverse to that type of violence, even though it's in a hyper-real world.
And even though they set it up as that this is not a, how would you, tolerant church. It's not even, this is not a tolerant.
Sure. So, I mean, that scene took me by surprise only because, again, I was like, Jesus, like, oh my God. It's like, people are dying badly.
Yeah.
So, but, yeah.
But, you're right.
Bring it on.
Some of them, but I can justify it because some of them deserve to go.
Right.
Intolerant bastards.
Sons of bitches.
No, and then that was the funny line from him too. Of like, I there's no way I can repeat it, but I'm going to make love to my gay, black, Jewish, this, that, whatever the hell it is.
Right.
Leading into everything, yeah.
All right. Anything else story-wise you guys want to talk about?
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit too about Matthew Vaughn, his way of filming and everything, because he was brought up. The question, as it seems to be every director today, is brought up: film or digital? And he's like, well, he goes, I have to say, he goes, yeah, I loved working in film. He goes, and I understand that there's that small percent, feel that there's a little bit of film magic going on. He goes, but that's like 10%. And those 10% of that audience, they don't care. He goes, for me working, he goes, I'll never work in film again. He goes, because working digital for me is just so much easier. It's way more efficient. And being able to make my vision, and I can make my movie look as close to film, and I can do it out there, and I don't have to worry about so much about I can retake something, don't have to worry about that. His biggest problem is something that we've talked about. I know I've talked about it. His biggest problem is shitty projection systems at movie theaters. It doesn't matter what you're going to exhibit your movie on, whether it's film or digital. If you've got a shitty theater, your movie's going to look shitty. It doesn't matter. And he's like, there should be more of an outcry from people about that than there should be you asking me film or digital. And I agree. I agree with him. And I think... he and his it also says it gives him a little bit more power over his DP. Mm-hmm. Because it's in digital. Before in film, your DP really had to be on his game. But now I can collaborate a little more, and I can even tell him, well, I'll do this anyways, because we can fix it in post, like literally. So it was an interesting piece. It was interesting to hear his take on film versus digital. So. Being we're in this digital age, and the movie's about technology.
That it is.
Yeah.
I particularly like the music because it almost was James Bond, right? It took that iconic James Bond opening song, and then kind of twisted it.
Right.
Would you guys agree?
I already said I love the music. I thought the music was so fun and exhilarating throughout the whole movie. I remember actually I just felt like I was moving the whole time. So to me, it was an outstanding soundtrack. It was so fun, and there was so much life in it.
Was it you doing the pee-pee dance?
No.
So you were definitely...
I think
no.
I think the best use of the music, particularly in this film, was at the end when everybody's heads were exploding. That was by far the most memorable use of the music because literally it went with all the cues of head exploding, and it was used in such an over-the-top comical way that you can't forget that. Right. It went so seamlessly perfect with just how everything exploded. Along with the music is just
it was great.
That really just
although it
nailed
doesn't quite make sense why they would go in different times and not all at once. But that's just
signal flow.
But
then it would
what
be
other
random,
movie have we
in
seen?
order.
What other movies have we seen where it's so choreographed perfectly to music, just like that?
Oh, I'm sure there's some. I just can't. Think
I mean, I'm sure there's a few, but that was.
The interview was choreographed to Firework.
Yeah.
So let's be honest.
And I haven't seen the
multiple firework explosions.
But this was multiple head explosions, so I will give it props to that.
It looked great.
Only thing that would have made it even better was if they used Firework. That right? That would,
Yeah.
I think the self-imploding was enough.
Yeah, I was fine with that.
All right. Anything else before we wrap up?
I'm good.
Overall, I thought this movie was fantastic. It was a really fun, adventurous movie.
That it was.
It was just a good time at the movies, and I think to your point too, when we're going into Academy season tonight or this weekend, we'll wrap everything up with that. Thankfully, that we get to move on. But this movie coming out when it did, you know, and again, I commend them for picking this date because it was the first movie to come out that really truly was. It delivered. It's a good movie. Critical. It's gotten some good critical acclaim. But people are liking this. But it's an entertaining movie.
I'm gonna buy it.
You know, so yeah, it'll be
says
good.
a lot.
I look forward to it. I do look forward to it and coming out on Blu-ray. But if somebody who hadn't seen it would say, "Hey, I want to go see this movie," I would go see it again. Yeah, without.
Yeah, it's
Sure.
good.
That's the other fun thing is like I feel like you could really introduce a lot of people to this movie and be like, hey, let's watch this tonight. And like,
But
it's
I'd want to
fun,
see it at the
I'm on board.
theater. I'd, you know what I mean? Like I'd go. I'm with Demetri. I'd go. People are going this weekend. And I'd be like, yeah, let's go see it. The
Yeah.
only thing stopping me is that there's so many movies too that I got to see.
Yeah.
That it's just time wise not
It's
possible.
a widescreen spectacle type of movie.
Yeah, and like a James Bond movie. The only thing that this movie didn't have as much as, say, a James Bond movie are the beautiful locales. Like, they didn't travel to Rio. Like, we saw Rio and stuff, but they didn't travel to these lush, tropical, or these beautiful places, or we didn't go skiing in the Alps. We didn't have this. That's another, I think that's another way in which they really contain their budget.
Well, they switched
doing
that out
things,
for
yeah.
the training scenes.
So, yeah.
Instead of your locations and your beautiful different climates, you got training,
Yeah.
which to me was just as fun.
Yeah.
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 Very cool. All right, guys. So we're gonna end on my favorite song of the movie, the very James Bond-esque outro. There we go. Now, in the meantime, as we wrap out, where can the people find you, Demetri?
They can find me here at the Popcorn Talk Network, also on Twitter at DMovies1701. So that's at DMovies1701.
And Sarah Stretton is on Box Office Breakdown Mondays with
I
a JTE.
am with JT. Hello. Yeah, that's where you can find me here, Popcorn Talk, sometimes AfterBuzz TV. You know, bounce around, but not on Twitter.
Soon in a movie coming your way.
Yes. And you can follow me on Twitter at Serafini TV.
There you go. And of course, we are the Popcorn Talk on Twitter, Instagram, and all that stuff. Once again, subscribe, youtube.com/Popcorn Talk Network. Head on over to iTunes, which, by the way, huge shout out to iTunes. They're featuring all of our shows in their movie segment.
Go iTunes.
That's right.
Yeah,
You know,
iTunes. I love them.
They were great. I said, we've got 6 out of 10 of them up. Can we put the other 4? And then we got 9 out of 9. I was like, we're just missing one. Can we just put that one up there too? And they were great. So we love everyone over at iTunes.
We love iTunes.
They're
Love
amazing.
iTunes. I still buy my music. Albums from iTunes. Not just singles, full-on albums.
Well, the great news is to buy us, it's just free 99. Free 99. That's right. All right, guys. We'll see you here next time.
Before we cut out, can I do one shout-out to friends of the show who are actually up for an Academy Award nomination? We had them on the show. Craig Mann, Ben Wilkins, sound mixing for Whiplash.
Nice.
Break a leg, guys, because wouldn't it be awesome to say that in an Anatomy of a Movie we had Academy Award-winning pedigree on our show? I think
There
that would
you
be
go.
great.
Absolutely.
So, have
So-
fun watching the Academies this weekend, folks.
That's
Nice.
right, and join us for other Anatomy of Movie dissections. Coming up, we've got 50 Shades of Grey. We've got Hot Tub Time Machine 2. That's gonna be my what? Don't do that, Sarah Stretton. And that's it.
What's the Kevin Costner movie? The sports movie.
McFarlane USA.
McFarlane USA.
All right, so much good stuff. We Avengers: Age of Ultron and some Jurassic World. We've got a lot of stuff.
That's months away.
We've got
I'm teasing.
Lots of
I'm
things to look
teasing.
Are you
forward
kidding me? We
to.
got Fast and Furious coming out in April. So
Still
we've
months
got-
away.
Well, it'll
Teasing.
be here
All
before
right,
you know it.
see you next time.
Bye, all.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.